The new series of Fleabag is still very much focused on her as a central character, but it is exploring the next stage of her life, obviously. But also, I always saw the last series as sort of the chapter of her life where she was really in the eye of the storm of her grief, and she was really battling to deal with the front that she uses against the world to combat her own self-hatred. So this one is her growing up slightly and having to accept and live with the grief, and it's how her life has evolved. And she's trying to have a better life. She's eating lots of pine nuts and avocados and going on lots of runs, and she's just about holding it together when someone new comes into her life and shakes it all up a bit, as do some family members who she was surprised to see back in her life again too. I was approaching grief in this series, or Fleabag's grief in particular. Actually, it was one of the main reasons I felt like we could come back, because grief never leaves you, and the ghost of that person or the feeling that is left with you after they've gone never leaves you. And I wanted to honour that somehow, and that life does go on. And Boo was haunting Fleabag every 5 minutes in the last series, and actually she's gone to a stage of her life where she still carries that around with her, but it manifests in a slightly different way. So Boo does occur, but with a slightly different energy and surprise, I think. But the grief is still very much there. It just doesn't inform her every single second of her day. Really, this series is dealing with the choices that you make in your life. You make a choice that makes you feel secure, whether it's you get married or you just work out a lot or you throw yourself into your work. And those are things that make you feel in control. And it's what happens when you start pulling the threads of those things that make you feel in control. It's quite a natural thing that once you feel quite secure, you actually want something to come and blow it all up again. And so you sort of go looking for that. Or if you meet somebody who's very secure, somebody like Fleabag maybe, would feel the impulse to see what happens if you pull the thread of those people. It's kind of about that. It's also about family and how deeply you can hurt each other and how quickly you can forgive each other. And also just what happens when you have distance from the people that you love and how you inevitably find your way back to them. And it's also in some ways about faith and love and courage, but I stole that from the director. He said that. He said he was going to say that, and so I've stolen that, and I went first. So Fleabag and Claire haven't actually been in touch since the last series, and there's been that sort of sisterly gap in Fleabag's life, and then they're thrown together again. It throws up all other kinds of stressful circumstances for them both. There is an element of drama in their reconciliation. That was the relationship that I just couldn't wait to get back and start writing. I love those two so much. Knowing what an extraordinary actress Sian Clifford is, she's one of those actresses you could just paint 1,000 rainbows and she'll just go and do it all without hesitation, and she really did. We took Claire in a really interesting place, and Sian is frustratingly stealing the show. There is still a guinea pig in the series. Hilary is very much still in existence. And unbelievably, it's the actual same guinea pig actress from the first series. And that's 2.5 years. And usually they last, I think. They live. They live for about that long. So she really clung on. She clung on for that second bite at the cucumber. They're very sweet and they're very vulnerable. I think that's why I was drawn to Hilary, and just naturally comedic. I mean, she's got the timing of a queen, but I adore her. It's very difficult. She's the hardest one to say goodbye to at the end of the wrap. She was put under pressure by the camera in the presence of the audience to reveal herself and her true secrets at the end of the last one. That's really exposing, and so much of her to-camera character was this kind of acerbic, candid, nothing can touch me, strong character. And but underneath that was all this vulnerability and self-hatred. And when that all comes to the fore, she can't hide that from the camera anymore. She can't hide that from the audience anymore. And so the evolution, the natural evolution, is that she's much more vulnerable in front of the camera from the off. The relationship with the camera has slightly changed. So she can't get away with just being like, you know, all the time, because you guys know what lies beneath. So she's had to grow up for that reason, which makes the relationship oddly deeper, I think, between her and the camera, and more uncomfortable for her. So she's become more sensitive, and she has grown up a bit, but not in like a boring way. Maybe a bit in a boring way at the beginning, but then it gets exciting again. We revisit quite a lot of the relationships from the last series, particularly with the family. They all left broken at the end of the last one, and they all left having kind of betrayed Fleabag in some way or another and had hurt her. And so there has been a gap. And she also knows that she's hurt them as well, but there's that kind of uncomfortable glassiness between them all, but in a way that is very British and also quite familial. Sometimes something happens in a family and you just all need to come back together, no matter what's happened in the past. And that's what happens at the beginning of this series. On one level, it's because it's family and that's what you do. But on another level, that really betrays the fact that Fleabag wants to be near them, really. But they're all still there. Dad's still around, Godmother's still around, and Claire's still around, and Martin's still around. And a couple of conquests from the last series have a little squeaky return. Everyone's incredibly professional, which means there is room for play. And this series, actually, there was more spontaneity on set, like I was rewriting on set a bit more, because the characters, the ones that have come back, we already know the nuance. So the actors are bringing so much already with them. And there's an amazing scene with Bill Patterson, who plays my dad. It was a good scene, but then Bill came up and just had all these brilliant ideas, and it was really fizzing, and there was so much history between us. And then it sort of became this brilliant scene because of his contribution, and I felt that happened a lot more this season. But they're incredible. I mean, Olivia Colman can be adorable and then monstrous in the space of a millisecond. And yeah, Bill Patterson just broke my heart all the way through this season. And then sparring with Sian is just endless, endless fun. I mean, I could just act alongside her all day. Fleabag began because I was challenged to write a 10-minute piece of stand-up. Took on the challenge, and the first 10 minutes became the first 10 minutes of what then became a 1-hour-long play that I took to Edinburgh Festival. And it was really just written so that I could play a part that was not a princess part, which is, as an actress, I just felt there weren't that many parts out there that were kind of dark and edgy. And then went to Edinburgh, I had this amazing response there, and then brought the play back to London. And people just really responded to the fact that I think she was a really complicated and darkly funny and sexually candid and kind of unapologetic, and then with this really twisted backstory. And then obviously the rule that I had is that it had to be funnier than it was sad for the first kind of 80% of it, and then I just wanted to have a sucker punch at the end. And so that was the deal that we made as a team, making the play. And it worked, and it paid off. We went to Edinburgh, this small little guerrilla outfit, and then suddenly it came back to London, and it grew and grew and grew, and then the BBC commissioned a pilot. And then I spent about a year wrestling out of a one-woman show into this, multi-character TV show. And then Amazon came on board, and then the rest is sort of history, really. And then it was just about expanding that story. Avoiding being pigeonholed as a writer is, I think, something that a lot of writers talk about. But I think the lucky thing with Fleabag is that I was trying to straddle the two genres at once anyway. So I wanted it to present as a comedy and then twist into a drama. So I actually often described it as a drama disguised as a comedy. And so I think that then helped. So then when Sid Gentle and Sally Woodward-Gentle came to me for Killing Eve, she had a drama and she wanted it to have comedy elements to it. She'd seen both in Fleabag. But I think just as long as you're just constantly writing something truthful, and then just try not to define yourself as a writer, and that you're always just following the truth of the characters and the truth of the story, it will always be funny and it will always be dramatic at the same time. If anything's only one or only the other, then you should be pigeonholed. Is it a joy? It is a joy. It is a joy being both the lead in the show and writing it. It's just exhausting, it's the only thing. But it's really good to be able to control the material that much, and also to be able to take responsibility for it. So if you've tried something and it doesn't quite work, then you're the fall guy. You've got to actually get out there and perform it, which in most circumstances means you up your game even more, I think. And on set, it's great because you can communicate with all the other actors about the writing as well, and in the middle of scenes as well. So it's actually a brilliant way to go. But also the problem with Fleabag is that I'm in every scene. So it's as exhausting for the audience as I think it is for me at times. Comedy and pathos strikes a chord because they're so closely related. When we're laughing, we make ourselves very vulnerable. When I was doing the play, I felt it really profoundly because there are people sat opposite you and you're making them laugh and they're going, and they've got their mouths open, they've forgotten where they are for a second and their chests are open. And there's something really disarming about that. And I think People open themselves up to then be punched in the heart. When we're at our saddest, we find relief from laughing. And when we're laughing so much, sometimes we can laugh so much that we can feel emotional. The extremities of both go hand in hand. And I think if anyone is making that many jokes, like Fleabag, at that kind of a rate, that they're hiding some kind of pain underneath it all. And I think we could all relate to that to a certain degree.